poverty
Is poverty everyone's
Poverty everyone's problem?
Is poverty everyone's
Is poverty
Is
everyone's
poverty
problem?
everyone's problem? Is poverty everyone's
Is
problem?
poverty
Be everyone's
Poverty is everyone's problem.
Is everyone's problem, not in an entirely economic standpoint, but partially a socio-economic one.
While someone being in poverty may not directly affect you, it definitely indirectly affects you as a person.
It's a very confusing question. To an extent, I guess it could be.
Affect the world as a whole.
I think everyone has like a part to play in alleviating it.
Poverty, everyone's problem.
Sometimes poverty can be caused by a person's own situation. I think everyone does have a part to play in trying their best to eradicate poverty. It should be national concern.
Yes.
To an extent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
We all live on this planet.
As a collective humanity,
Earn money and
if one part of humanity is suffering, we all suffer.
pay money, and I
All have to collectively work on eliminating extremes of wealth as well as poverty.
need to be looking out for those who are in need.
I don't believe that everybody should be held accountable.
Poverty is everyone's problem.
People that have
On a selfish level,
the opportunity to aid or support.
when somebody gets out of poverty, it benefits you as an individual.
Like
Society's responsibility to ensure that
poverty, not support it.
poverty is eradicated.
So, a small introduction to Singapore and Thailand, as those are the two countries we're going to continue discussing in our video. Singapore has the overall economic freedom world ranking number 1, whereas Thailand has the ranking of 43. The population of Singapore is 5.6, whereas Thailand is 67.8. Unemployment rates in Singapore are 3.8%, Thailand they're 0.7%. Inflation rates in Singapore, which are 0.4%, and in Thailand 1.1%. The foreign domestic investment inflow in Singapore is $77.6 billion. Thailand, it is $10.5 billion. These facts are based off of the 2020 Index of Economic Freedom. Singapore in Southeast Asia is a highly developed free market economy which has gained its independence in the last 60 years. Thailand, also in Southeast Asia, and has had 19 military coups since 1932. It's a mixed economy with centralized economic plan. Both countries have a very similar literacy rate of around 92%, and both countries are secular, meaning that they don't follow any religion. Singapore has a large inequality gap, as it has the most millionaires in the world, but also the largest inequalities in Asian countries, placing second on the list. 10 to 14% of Singaporeans face severe poverty. They have difficulty affording basic needs, with hunger being one of the largest factors. Poverty is also an increasing problem in Singapore. Poverty is an issue for the elderly, as in the time frame of 2012 to 2015, the number of people over 60 years relying on government assistance increased by approximately 75%. Poverty is also an issue for the young, as people in between the ages of 15 and 34 are the second most affected group by poverty. Many people are also trapped in the poverty cycle. Singaporeans born into poverty are most likely to stay in poverty. Government assistance is not enough, and as poverty grows, so does the popularity of the ruling party. Singapore receives little foreign aid, and foreign aid has dropped significantly since the mid-1990s. The lack of aid may be partially due to how hidden poverty is in Singapore. In Thailand, the inequality between the rural and urban regions also contribute as one of the major causes of poverty. Inequality exists among various sectors, the most prominent being education and the lack thereof. Thailand's northeastern population is especially much less educated and more economically disadvantaged than other parts of the country. The economic costs of these are, in both countries, people fall into the poverty trap and our inability to bounce back from crisis.
tactic to tackling poverty is improving education. Could expand access to high quality early childhood education programs. Help more people, whatever inequality, income inequality or social inequality there is. It'll help children from different families be able to get a high quality early education, and this might help propagate their education overall. The government should focus on recruiting, training and supporting teachers. A country with a good base of teachers and a good quality of the teaching cohort, higher literacy rates, education standards, improve and expand school-based early warning systems and tie them to evidence-based interventions for at-risk students. But this helps people who are on the edge or the verge of dropping out to help keep more people motivated and encouraged to a better education. And then finally, encourage college saving plans. More people going to college and getting a higher level of education help increase the number of workers in the tertiary sector, and this would mean higher quality of jobs and therefore higher incomes. Improving education can impact poverty greatly. For example, education develops skills and abilities. Education can help fight inequality. For example, you have income inequality. It would help people move out of the poverty cycle. Not only that, it would help people of minority earn an equal place in society. And then education can decrease risk and vulnerability. Would help people be more aware of the risky factors that could play into possibly taking a loan or applying for a certain kind of job. It helps the population be more educated about their choices and make better choices. Firstly, Singapore spends quite a lot on education, so the annual government spending is set to double. Education is also the fourth most spent on sector for the government budget, around $13.5 billion. For quality of education, Singapore is among the top 20 countries, fluctuating between the 11th and 9th place based on quality of education. Singapore has a 97.5% literacy rate. It is also known to have the highest average IQ in the world. Government spending is quite a lot. There's almost 20% of the national budget. For the quality, while Singapore spends less percent of its budget on education, it ranks second in quality of education, while Thailand ranks 47th. And the literacy rate is a 92.87, with males having a 94.66% literacy rate and females having a 91.9.
Another method to reduce poverty rates is to use progressive taxation. The definition is that when the tax rate increases as the taxable amount increases. We should use progressive taxes to help reduce poverty levels, as it can allow for an even distribution of wealth, which is one of the macroeconomic aims of the government. It can help get more tax revenue, as the government collects more tax revenue from those with more higher income rates due to progressive taxes, and the government can use this on public or merit goods and invest in things such as quality healthcare and education that can help them get out of the poverty cycle. It'll also have help get less pressure for those in poverty. This means that for the people who are already struggling with extremely low levels of income, they can have more opportunities to use the money that they have on basic needs and necessities.
The impacts of losing education have both negatives and positives. The positives, of course, include an increased access to jobs outside of the primary sector, where most low-income families probably have their breadwinners, more female empowerment, an increased level of health among citizens, and a lower food insecurity. The empowerment, health, and food insecurity aspects to this will just help stop the poverty cycle, as these are the things that drive people further into poverty, because they lose their ability to do good work when they don't eat enough or they aren't healthy enough and suffering from diseases. And education will increase awareness about the necessity that is maintaining good health and proper nutrition. But of course, there's also negatives, because this doesn't seem like a very realistic option to be implemented in the short term because of the vast funding that it will require from the government's part. Education cannot be made mandatory till 16 or 18 until a large sum of money is put aside for it, which in turn will have an opportunity cost, which will have its own ramifications. For example, if this money is coming from healthcare or public housing, and their people will be suffering instead. On the other hand, progressive taxation as a tool to eradicate poverty also has its positives and negatives, and the positives include a better quality of public services and goods, more equal income distribution, and a higher average quality of life with more disposable income, which kind of just levels the playing field for everyone in a society. But this appears to be a very short-term solution. It is likely that the wealthier citizens of the country are driven to go and put their money in offshore bank accounts and tax havens so that they don't have to pay these high tax rates imposed by their countries. And in the end, the country just ends up losing tax revenue, which is not something that anyone wants. However, these are both very viable options focus is given to education, because according to UNESCO, if all students in low-income countries had just basic reading skills with nothing else, an estimated 171 million people could escape extreme poverty. If all adults completed secondary education, we could cut the global poverty rate by more than 50%. Main question of this slideshow, which is, can poverty be eradicated? And the short answer is no. just because relative poverty can never be eradicated, because that people will never be equal in terms of wealth. That's just very unrealistic. The best that can be done is that inequalities are decreased so that no one lives in absolute or extreme poverty. That would take a lot. We would pretty much have to end violent conflict, sustain high rates of economic growth, avoid any recession in poor countries, and make sure nobody disabled or seriously ill sees their income drop to less than $1.25 a day. It doesn't seem like it is going to be an option anytime soon. So the future implications of decreasing inequalities obviously will increase access to education, healthcare, sanitation, and a lot of other things attributed to the UN's SDGs. Relative poverty being prevalent will also make sure that occurrences like petty theft and a section of society without access to these necessities will always be present.